I'm Reese. Last Christmas, my stepmother stood up in front of everyone at the dinner table and called me selfish, not under her breath, not to my dad in private. Out loud, with a glass of champagne in her hand and a smile on her face, like she'd been saving it up all year. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that my dad just picked up his fork and started eating. I'd driven 4 hours to be there. I took 3 days off work. I brought a pie I'd made from scratch because my grandmother used to make the same one every December and I thought it might mean something. It ended up sitting on the counter, untouched, while my stepbrother crew got a full round of applause for buying a box of grocery store cookies. That's how it always went in that house. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should tell you who I am first. I'm 31. I'm a middle school reading teacher in Columbus. I live alone, which I used to apologize for at family dinners until I stopped going to enough of them to bother. I have a cat named after a poet nobody's heard of, and a small apartment that feels more like home than anywhere I grew up. My parents divorced when I was 6. My dad remarried fast, faster than he should have, looking back. My stepmother, Lynette, moved in before I'd finished 2nd grade. She had a son, Crew, who was 2 years older than me and had the energy of someone who'd been told since birth that rooms were built around him. My dad tried. I want to be fair about that. He showed up to things. He called on birthdays, but there's a difference between being present and being there, and he was almost never the second one. When Lynette was in the room, he became a different person. Softer. Quieter. Smaller. Like he was always bracing for something. I spent most of my childhood figuring out where I fit. The answer, usually, was somewhere slightly off to the side. The Christmas I'm telling you about, I almost didn't go. My best friend Odette had been telling me for 2 years that I should stop trying. You leave every time feeling worse than when you arrived, she said. That's not a family dinner, Reese. That's a punishment you keep signing up for. She wasn't wrong, but there's something about a childhood home, or a place that was supposed to be one, that keeps pulling you back. You keep thinking this time it'll be different. This time you'll feel it, the thing you were supposed to feel. That warmth, that ease. The particular kind of relief that comes from being somewhere you belong. I drove up on December 23rd. The house looked different. They'd had the exterior painted, put up new shutters, redone the landscaping. It didn't look like anywhere I remembered. I sat in the driveway for a minute before I got out. Inside, Crew was already there. He was in the living room with his girlfriend, both of them arranged on the couch like they'd staged it, laughing at something on his phone. He looked up when I walked in, gave me the kind of nod you give a coworker you see in the elevator, and went back to his screen. Lynette swept in from the kitchen with her arms already open. She had a way of doing that. Big entrance, big welcome, that felt more like a performance than a greeting. There she is, she said. She hugged me with the kind of grip that looks warm from across the room and feels like nothing up close. We were just starting to wonder. I was 20 minutes early. I'd checked 3 times. My dad was in the kitchen finishing the potatoes. He smiled when I came in, gave me a real hug, the kind that lasts 2 seconds longer than it needs to. That part was real. I held on to it. The first hour was fine in the way that first hours often are, surface level. Everyone on their best behavior. Nobody saying the things that are actually on their minds. I helped set the table. Lynette talked about Crew's new promotion. My dad asked about my school, and I could tell he was listening, at least a little. And then we sat down. Lynette stood up to give a toast. She did it every year. That was her thing, the Christmas toast, the one she practiced. The one she delivered with her chin lifted and her voice doing that particular quiver she'd perfected. This year, she began, I just want to say how grateful I am for this house, for this table, for the people in it who show up, not just physically, but emotionally, who invest in this family, who give back. She looked around the table slowly. Her eyes passed over me like I was part of the furniture. To family, she said. The real kind. They all raised their glasses. Crew, his girlfriend, my dad who wouldn't look at me. I raised mine too. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. The same impulse that made me drive 4 hours and bake a pie. The dinner went on. Crew talked about his job. His girlfriend talked about an apartment they were thinking of buying. Lynette refilled her glass twice. My dad asked questions he already knew the answers to. No one asked what I was reading with my students, or how the new school year was going, or what I'd been doing with myself. Then came the moment. Lynette had moved on to dessert. Not my pie, I noticed, but a store-bought cheesecake she'd arranged on a nice plate to make it look homemade. She was on her third glass of wine by then, and her voice had gotten that particular looseness that meant whatever filter she usually kept in place was starting to slip. "You know what I think about?" she said to no one in particular and everyone at once. "Gratitude, real gratitude. Not just saying thank you, but acting grateful. Showing it." She tilted her head in my direction. "Some people could learn from that." The table went quiet in the specific way tables do when everyone hears something they weren't supposed to hear but knows they're not going to say anything. Crew looked down at his cheesecake. His girlfriend studied the tablecloth. My dad cleared his throat. "Who wants more coffee?" he said. That was it. That was the whole response. Nobody pushed back. Nobody said anything. They just moved on, the way they always did, leaving me sitting there with my face warm and my hands folded in my lap, holding completely still, because I'd learned a long time ago that showing anything in that house just gave them more to work with. I excused myself after dessert, said I needed some air. Went out to the back porch, which still had the same broken board it had when I was 12, and stood there in the cold for a while. I wasn't surprised. That was the thing. I was used to this. I'd been used to it for so long that I'd almost started to mistake the feeling for normal. But something was different that night. I couldn't name it then. Standing on that porch in my good coat with the lights from the neighbor's yard blinking through the trees, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not sadness exactly, more like the last piece of something falling into place, like I finally understood the shape of what I'd been staring at for 30 years. I went back inside, got my bag, told them I had an early morning, which was a lie, but a forgivable one. My dad walked me to the door. He hugged me again and said, "I love you, kiddo," and I believed him. And also understood that love and presence are two completely different things, and you can have one without the other. I drove home in the dark. I didn't cry. I listened to a podcast about birds. 2 days after Christmas, I got a voicemail from Lynette. I didn't listen to it right away. It sat on my phone for 3 days while I thought about whether I wanted to know what she'd said. I finally played it on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee. "Reese, it's Lynette. I just want to say your father and I have been talking, and we feel like the holidays were a little tense, and we just want everyone to move forward positively. Your father is putting together his estate plans and we'd love for you to be involved, but that requires some cooperation and goodwill from everyone. And I just think it would be worth a conversation about whether we're all on the same page." I stood there in my kitchen with the coffee dripping and played it again. Estate plans. I'd spent my whole childhood in that house. My mother, my biological mother, who died of an aneurysm when I was 9, had left behind a small savings account. Not a lot. But my dad had told me once, years ago, that it was set aside. That it was mine. I hadn't thought about it in years. I'd worked my way through college on loans and part-time jobs and a scholarship I'd nearly killed myself to keep. I'd never asked my dad about the account, not once, because asking felt like admitting I needed something. But now I was thinking about it. I called my Aunt Vera that afternoon. She was my mother's older sister, 72. Sharp as a tack, and one of the only people from my mother's side of the family I still talk to. She'd moved to Tucson after my mother died, and we had a standing Sunday call that we both maintained for 15 years. I told her about the voicemail. She was quiet for a long moment. "Reese," she said, "I need to tell you something. I've been sitting on it for a while, and I think it's time." She told me that she'd talked to my mother's attorney a long time ago, that my mother had left specific instructions about the savings account. It was in a letter, not a formal will. My mother had been 34 when she died and hadn't gotten around to that. But a letter to my dad, notarized, specifying that the money was for my college education. Only that, no exceptions. "Did Dad ever mention it?" I asked. Another pause. "The account was closed," Vera said carefully. About 8 months after he and Lynette got married. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Just sat down. One of those moments where your legs make the decision before your brain does. She had a son starting a business, Vera said. Your dad said it was a loan. He said he'd pay it back. He never paid it back. No. I'd worked 2 jobs the summer before my freshman year of college. I'd taken out $18,000 in loans. I told myself it was just how things went, that some people didn't have help and that was okay. Now I was sitting on my kitchen floor at 31 years old, doing math. I spent the next week going through things. I still had access to the email account I'd had since high school. I'd never changed it, some sentimental attachment to the old address. Buried in there were emails from my dad from around the time I started college, forwarded statements, numbers that matched. I also found something I hadn't been looking for, a chain of emails from Crew to my dad from the same year. Subject line: the new venture. Crew talking about his business plan. My dad responding with the phrase, "I'll take care of it," in a way that wasn't about Crew's business at all. I kept the emails. I screenshotted everything. I put it all in a folder on my desktop and named it something boring so I wouldn't have to look at the label every day. Then I called Vera back and asked her if she still had the letter. She did. She'd been holding on to it for 20 years. I drove to Tucson. Vera opened the door before I knocked. She's a small woman with white hair and paint-stained fingers. She does watercolors, sells them at a farmer's market. And she looked at me the way she always does, like she's glad I exist in a way that nobody in my immediate family ever quite managed. "Come in," she said. I made soup. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours. She gave me the letter, the original, still in the envelope, the notary stamped faded but legible. She gave me a folder of documents she'd kept from the time right after my mother died, things she said she'd saved, just in case. "In case of what?" I asked. "In case you needed them someday," she said. "I'm glad it's today and not later." I read the letter 3 times before I put it down. My mother had been careful, specific. She'd written out the account information, the amount $22,000, and the intended purpose. She'd had it witnessed by 2 people and notarized. She'd written at the bottom, in her actual handwriting, "This is for Reese's future. Please protect it." I didn't cry until I got to that line. Then I cried for a while. Vera put her hand on mine and didn't say anything, which was exactly the right thing to do. I drove back to Columbus with the folder on my passenger seat. On the way home, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, it was Crew. "Hey, so Lynette mentioned you might be asking some questions. I just want to say, I think it's worth having a conversation before anyone does anything. Things were complicated back then and I don't think you have the full picture." His voice was careful. Practiced, even. Not quite the easy confidence he usually carried. I didn't call back. I spent 2 weeks going through everything carefully. I was methodical about it. I made lists, cross-referenced dates, matched the account numbers in my mother's letter against old bank statements my aunt had copies of. The timeline was clean and simple. The account existed. It was closed 14 months after Lynette moved in, and Crew's business launched 6 months after that. I'm a reading teacher, not a lawyer, but I have a college friend, Dominique, who practices estate law in Cincinnati. I'd gone to her baby shower 2 years ago. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon and explained everything. She was quiet for a long time. "Send me the documents," she said. "The letter, the notarization, the bank statements, whatever you have." I sent them. She called back the next morning. "This isn't complicated," she said. "This is actually very clear. The question is what you want to do with it." I told her I needed to think. While I was thinking, the estate conversation moved forward without me. My dad called a rarity, he usually texted, and said that Lynette wanted to have everyone over to talk about the estate plans, that it would be good to do it in person, that he hoped I'd come. I said I'd think about it. The dinner happened on a Saturday in February. I drove up again. Different season, same house. Crew was there with his girlfriend. Lynette had made a roast. Everything looked carefully arranged, like a stage set designed to feel casual. Halfway through dinner, my dad explained the plan. The house would go to him and Lynette jointly. Upon his passing, to Lynette. Upon her passing, split between Crew and his girlfriend and any other family members who've maintained an active relationship with the household. The investment account, the one he'd built over 30 years, had already been designated to Crew in an updated filing. He said my name once. He said that I was, of course, included in spirit, and that he hoped I understood. I looked at him across the table. He didn't meet my eyes. Lynette was watching me. She had that look, the one she used when she was waiting to see if she'd won. I understand completely, I said. I meant it, just not the way she thought. I left dinner early again. This time I didn't pretend I had an early morning. I just said I needed to go and thank them for the food. In the car, I sent Dominique a text. I thought about it. I know what I want to do. She called me Monday morning. We weren't filing anything dramatic. We weren't going to court. That wasn't the point. And it wasn't the right move. What we were filing was a formal letter, with all the documentation attached, to my dad's estate attorney of record, informing him of the existence of a notarized letter from my late mother, requesting that it be considered in any existing estate planning. Dominique also suggested, gently, that I might want to send copies to a few people. Just so there was no ambiguity about what had happened, I sent them to my dad's 2 brothers, to my mother's attorney, retired but still findable, to the notary of record who confirmed she remembered the signing, and to one other person, my dad's financial advisor, who'd been managing his accounts for 12 years and had been CC'd on the account closing documentation when my mother's savings were transferred. I sent everything on a Thursday morning. Then I went to school and taught 4 classes about metaphor. My phone was full of messages by the time I got home. My uncle, my dad's older brother, left a voicemail that was mostly silence, and then I had no idea. I'm sorry, Reese. I didn't know. Crew sent a long text. I read it once and deleted it. It was the kind of text that starts with, I think there's been a misunderstanding, and ends with, I hope you know this hurts the whole family. I didn't respond. My dad called at 9:30 that night. I answered. Reese. His voice was different. Not angry. Just flat, like the air had gone out of something. Dad, you should have talked to me first. I tried, I said. I've been trying for a long time. He didn't respond right away. This isn't what your mother would have wanted, he said finally. I felt something very cold and very clear move through me. She wrote down exactly what she wanted, I said. I have it in her handwriting. You had it too. He hung up. Lynette's response came the next morning through text, which surprised me. I expected a voicemail or a formal letter or some kind of performance. Instead, it was 3 lines. What you've done is unforgivable. You've destroyed this family for money you were never going to see anyway. I hope you're satisfied. I read it. Set my phone face down on the table. Made tea. Stood by the window and watched the neighbor walk her dog in the gray winter light. I wasn't satisfied. That wasn't the right word. I wasn't triumphant either, or vindicated, or even particularly relieved. I was just done. With a very specific kind of done that doesn't feel like winning. It feels like finally being honest about something you've known for a long time but kept trying to unsee. Crew went quiet for 2 weeks. Then he sent one more message. Dad's not doing well. Hope you're happy with yourself. I answered that one. Not with anger. I wrote, I hope he's okay. I love him. I also have a right to what my mother left me. He didn't respond. Dominique called a few weeks later with an update. My dad's attorney had reviewed everything. There would be a conversation, formal, mediated, about the original account and whether any remedy was appropriate. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a process. Slow, careful, quiet. You handled this well, Dominique said. I didn't handle it, I said. I just stopped not handling it. There's a difference. I think about that a lot. In March, I had Vera and Odette over for dinner. I made the same pie I'd brought to Christmas, the one nobody touched. And this time we ate the whole thing. Odette brought wine. Vera brought a small watercolor she'd done of a bird she'd seen outside her window, which she gave me without ceremony and which now hangs above my kitchen table. We didn't talk about my dad for most of the evening. We talked about Odette's job and Vera's farmer's market and a book I'd been reading with my 7th graders that they'd gotten unexpectedly invested in. It was an ordinary evening in the best possible way. The kind where no one needs to perform anything and the food gets cold because no one gets up to leave. At some point, Vera looked at me and said, "Your mother would be glad." I didn't answer for a second. "I know," I said. That was enough. I haven't spoken to Lynette since her text. I've talked to my dad twice, short calls, careful ones, both of us trying to find something solid to stand on. I don't know what happens next between us. I'm not sure he does either. I used to think forgiveness meant going back. Now I think it might just mean putting something down. Crew sent one last message in April. Subject line, olive branch. Body, a paragraph about family being complicated and holidays being hard and maybe we could all start fresh. There was no mention of the money. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a clean reframe, offered with a smile I could almost hear. I didn't respond. Here's what I know now. I spent a lot of years trying to earn a place in a house that had already decided I was furniture. I made pies no one ate. I drove 4 hours to sit at tables where they couldn't quite look me in the eyes. I called it family. I told myself it was enough. It wasn't. And I wasn't selfish for finally saying so. They called me selfish. What I actually was tired. Tired of waiting for people to see me. Tired of pretending the not seeing was okay. Tired of carrying the particular weight of knowing something is wrong and choosing again and again to let it go because the alternative felt too hard. The alternative wasn't that hard. It was just honest. My mother left me something. Not just the money, though that matters. She left me a document that said in her handwriting, "This is for Reese's future. Please protect it." I was the one who had to protect it. It just took me a while to understand that she meant more than the account. If you're sitting with something like this, a family that makes you smaller, a situation that everyone around you pretends is fine, I want you to know that it is okay to name it. You're not obligated to keep preserving someone else's comfort at the cost of your own. You don't have to blow anything up. You don't have to go to war. You just have to stop pretending. That's it. That's the whole thing. Stop pretending and see what's actually there. If any part of this felt familiar, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. I read everything. And if you didn't connect with it, I want to hear that too. Tell me why. I mean it. Take care of yourself. Like you actually mean it. I spent a long time thinking the problem was me. That's the thing nobody tells you about growing up in a house where you're the afterthought. You internalize it. You start to believe that if you were just easier, just quieter, just more grateful, things would be different. You drive 4 hours, you bake the pie. You raise your glass at the toast even when the toast was designed to cut you, and then you sit in the car on the way home and wonder what you did wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. It just took me until I was 31 to really understand that, when Lynette called me selfish at that Christmas table, she was counting on something. She was counting on the fact that I would do what I'd always done: go quiet, hold still, let it pass. She'd said things like that before, and it had always worked. I'd absorbed it, filed it away, driven home in the dark and told myself it didn't matter. What she didn't know was that some things, once you finally see them clearly, can't be unseen. The call from Vera. The letter in my mother's handwriting. The account numbers that matched. All of it sitting in a folder on my desktop, quiet and patient, waiting for me to stop pretending. There's something I've come to believe about the way our choices catch up with us. Not as punishment, not as some outside force delivering justice, but simply as consequence. The natural, ordinary consequence of how we treat people over time. Lynette made a series of choices across 30 years, so did my dad, so did Crew. And those choices accumulated into a shape I could finally see and name and hold documentation for. I didn't manufacture the truth, I just stopped burying it. That's what I mean when I say this wasn't about revenge. Revenge would have required me to want something from them, some reaction, some acknowledgement, some collapse. I didn't want any of that. I wanted what my mother actually left me, and I wanted to stop carrying the weight of a story that had been rewritten without my consent. The hardest part wasn't confronting them. It was confronting myself, specifically the version of me that kept showing up, kept trying, Kept believing that if I just gave it one more chance, the table would feel different. That took real honesty. The kind that doesn't feel brave in the moment. It just feels like finally admitting what you already knew. Vera kept that letter for 20 years because she understood something I was still learning, that knowing the truth matters, even when you can't act on it yet. That's not stubbornness, that's wisdom. The quiet, unglamorous kind that doesn't announce itself. It just waits, and holds on, and hands you what you need when you're finally ready. I think about my mother sometimes. A woman who died at 34 and still had the presence of mind to notarize a letter and write at the bottom, in her own handwriting, "This is for Reese's future." She never got to protect it herself, so she did the only thing she could. She left behind the means for me to do it. I protected it. It took me too long, and I made a lot of pies nobody ate along the way, but I got there. If you're somewhere in the middle of something like this, not ready yet, still showing up, still hoping the table will feel different, I'm not going to tell you to blow anything up. I'm just going to say, pay attention to what you already know. The truth doesn't usually arrive suddenly. It's been there. You've just been skiing away from it because looking at it meant deciding what to do. When you're ready to look, look. The rest follows.